I posted a picture of my own ensemble early on, like the second rehearsal we had in person, with everybody with their masks on and 6 feet apart. And, it looks like some kind of apocalyptic, dream. But the good news is that the students are craving playing in person together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Mark Spede. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great.
Yeah, we were just talking that we're recording in the beginning of November, and there's just a little bit of news going on in the world right now, but we're going to put it aside and have a conversation about band and music and hopefully have a good time with it.
Yes, that's a much more pleasant topic, I think, right now.
Absolutely. Mark, can you introduce yourself for the listeners who may not know your name?
Yeah, so I'm Mark Spede, and I currently serve as the president of the College Band Directors National Association, better known as CBDNA, and I'm also director of bands at Clemson University in South Carolina, and our football team has been doing very well in recent years, so most of you probably have heard of Clemson, although maybe, 10 years ago, maybe you might not have heard of Clemson, and certainly when I interviewed for the job, I had to look it up, on a map and see where it was because I didn't know much about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It took me a while to realize that it was its own town, that there was a town of Clemson. I knew the university was in South Carolina, but I thought it was a university that was named after, had a different name within a city.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know much either about it. But just to give a brief summation, John C. Calhoun owned a plantation here, and he was the vice president of the United States and a senator and secretary of war back in the mid-1800s. And his daughter married Thomas Green Clemson. And back in those days, the land passed to the husband of the offspring. It couldn't go to a woman. So Clemson, was bequeathed all the land that the university now sits on. And when he died, he gave the land to the state of South Carolina with the purpose of starting an institution of higher learning. And that's how we became Clemson.
So, Mark, let's go back here and let's go to the beginning. Can you tell your origin story? How did you get involved in music as a kid?
Yeah, so I grew up in Plainview, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. My dad took the train into the city every morning to go to work. And I didn't have anyone in my family who was musically inclined, and I didn't really know any musicians. But somehow the kids on my block, when we were about 9 years old, decided we wanted to start our own band. And so we divvied up who was going to play what instrument. And for whatever reason, I said, I want to be the drummer. So I asked my parents if I could take private lessons on the drums. So I guess I was about in 5th grade or so. And, they said, sure. And I started drum lessons and pretty quickly, realized, maybe I didn't realize, but my teacher did, that I had a natural inclination for this and progressed pretty quickly. And, sort of got more and more interested and practiced more and more. And the better I got, the more I practiced. It was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy there. And then by the time I was a junior in high school, my high school band director was really giving me a lot of opportunities, and really have to thank him. Gordon Russell was his name. And I was conducting, and I was arranging and writing music. And I remember he got pneumonia one time, and instead of hiring a substitute teacher, he advocated for me to run all the bands. So I got in a class and I conducted all the bands while he was out with pneumonia. So, pretty into music. And then when it was time to go to college, my parents and I were arguing about my career choices because I was getting recruited academically to, some Ivy League schools and such. I scored pretty well on the SAT. And, going into music was not really what my parents had envisioned for my life. They wanted a doctor or a lawyer. So we had a lot of battles about that. But when Michigan sent me a recruiting letter, they were the first and only university that correlated my SAT score and academic record with my interest in music. And that sort of sparked an interest. I didn't know much about Michigan growing up in New York. And we looked into it, really, like a top 5 public university. And so I sent in an audition tape and got accepted, and literally decided to go to Michigan, having never visited the campus. The first time I went to campus was for orientation. So had a fantastic musical experience, as you could imagine. This is, the people at Michigan at the time were, H. Robert Reynolds, director of bands, and Carl St. Clair was the assistant director of bands. He's now a pretty famous orchestral conductor. Larry Radcliffe, another pretty famous orchestral conductor, was another band director that I played for. And then, of course, someone came in during my junior year to start his doctoral studies. That was Jerry Junkins. So I played in some of his ensembles, and he was only about 5 years older than I was. I guess he's still 5 years older than me, but anyway, he made a huge impression on me, as they all did. But I had I also played for Gustav Meyer. He was the conductor of the top orchestra there. So, had a lot of varied musical experiences, played in the marching band, played in the jazz ensemble, did just about everything I could do playing wise. And I was a performance major. I didn't really go there to become a band director. Never really thought about that much. I just wanted to play, and I played a lot. But of course, when I graduated, it was like, okay, now what? And I auditioned for the Air Force Band in Langley, Virginia, and got the position. Actually, Lowell Graham was the conductor there, and the recruiter in New York, when I went to go sign the papers, he had all the paperwork, and I was all of 21 years old. He pushed the papers across the desk, and he said, well, just sign on the dotted line, and we have you for 4 years. And at 21 years of age, I thought 4 years was next to an eternity, and I just chickened out, and I didn't sign the papers. So that was kind of a weird turn right there. And then a little while later, I auditioned for the Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. There was an opening there, and I made the final round but did not win the audition, and decided that I didn't want to be an audition taker for the rest of my life. A lot of my friends who I went to school with, Michigan, kind of took that path, and we're struggling to make ends meet. And I just thought, well, I need to do something else. So I got a gig playing on the road. I was signed a year contract, and we played around the Midwest in a kind of a show band type thing. And then while I was in Muncie, Indiana, I just was poking around the music school, and I ran into somebody I had met when I played at Disney World in Orlando, Joe Scagnoli. He had been at Western Carolina when I first met him, but he was now at Ball State. And he said, Mark, what are you doing? And I said, I'm on the road with this band, but I'm coming off the road. My contract is ending, and I don't have a plan. He said, why don't you come here, do a master's degree in conducting, and you can help me out with all the bands. And I said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So that was really when I sort of decided that, well, maybe the band directing thing would be kind of cool. And that's really where I started getting serious about conducting. And rehearsal technique and all that kind of stuff. I did my first arrangements for marching band when I was at Ball State. And the great experience I had there was just the fact that I had so much hands-on experience. I conducted the 3rd concert band. I conducted the 3rd jazz ensemble. I was the assistant conductor of the 2nd concert band. And then, of course, got to guest conduct the top band a couple times a year. And so I got a lot of good experience there. And then was working on my certification to teach public school, and had a student teaching all lined up when a job at the University of Florida opened. This would have been the summer of 1989. And I had a fork in the road. I knew I wanted to teach college ultimately. And, I had a high school gig lined up. I was going to student teach and then become the assistant director as soon as the student teaching was over. That was Warsaw High School outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Marty Becker was the band director there. And this gig opened up at Florida, and I went down to interview, and they offered me the job the same day as I took the interview. And, I just decided to go the college route, and took the job there, 1989. And let's see, I was writing the drill for the marching band, and assistant director of the marching band, and pretty quickly they asked me to take over the percussion studio because the percussion teacher there was on a phased retirement. So he was doing one semester teaching and then off one semester. So they really didn't have anybody to teach. So I started doing that, and then he decided to retire after I did one semester of that. And there was a hiring freeze at the time, and they asked me to just continue on with the percussion studio. So, I got really into that. I think there were 3 percussion majors when I started that. And 5 years later, when I left Florida to go do my doctorate, there were 16 percussion majors. I started a percussion ensemble there, and we were traveling, touring with that group, and, it's starting to build up that program. But then it was off to Texas. Fortunately, I had kept in touch with Jerry, and went out to Austin to audition for the doctoral program there, and got in, and, had just an amazing time at Texas. And, it was just a fabulous time. My fellow students were just fantastic to be around. And then, of course, playing in Jerry's ensemble was really amazing. The level of playing and professionalism and expectation from that group was just at such a high level. Just getting to be around him every day was just absolutely the best time. So after, my wife got a great gig. As soon as we got to Austin, she interviewed at this company, and she really didn't want to take the job at first, but they kept pestering her, and she finally decided to take it. And her career really took off while we were in Austin. She worked for a startup company called Hoover's, and they had 30 people working for them when she started. A year later, I think they had about 150. And then about 18 months after she started, she was a vice president at the company, and then she was senior vice president. And then by the time I finished my doctorate, they wanted to move her to New York City. They were going to go public, and they wanted a presence in New York. So we followed her career, actually, and we moved to New York, lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and had our first child, was born there. And then they wanted her back in Austin, so we moved back to Austin. And then our older son was about 2 years old, and she was kind of getting burned out on the 60 to 80 hour weeks, and felt like she was missing his childhood. So the job at Clemson opened up, and I flew out for the interview and was offered the job. And so we traded in New York City and Austin for Clemson. And when I came back from the interview, she said to me, so tell me what Clemson's like. And I said, well, there's one stoplight in the middle of town. And she was like, you're kidding me. And I was like, no, it's pretty small. But they say it's a great place to raise a family, and we actually have found it a really great place to live. It took some getting used to, but my wife has a horse now. In fact, we were at the farm earlier this afternoon, and she's teaching the horse how to have a person riding it. That they have to be trained for that. So I was taking some video for riding the horse. So anyway, that was let's see. I started here in the fall of 2002, and here we are in 2020. I'm in my 19th season here, and it's gone so fast I can't even tell you.
Mm-hmm. I like how you define it in seasons, the football seasons.
Right. Yes, that's the way we measure time in the college marching band world. So yeah. So it's a little unusual. There's not that many directors of bands left that are actually the director of the marching band as well. But Clemson is kind of a place where, in a way, that needs to happen. We don't have a traditional music major here. We don't offer music education or performance. We have a performing arts degree where you can emphasize music theater or audio technology. And it just works out well that I'm the director of the marching band. And I have a great assistant, Timothy Hurlbert, and the two of us run the program together. And, I think we do we're a great team. We work great together, and it's been a really good run for the both of us.
Mark, I have some questions just listening to you, and things I was thinking about as you were talking. Last week's guest, which I haven't actually released the episode yet because you're going to be in 2 weeks, is Mike Giannetti, who actually teaches at Oyster Bay High School.
Oh, wow.
And you mentioned that you grew up in Plainview, which I think is down the road. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. We used to go to, as soon as we got our driver's license, me and my friends, Oyster Bay was a destination point because, it's right on the coast on the Long Island Sound. You could see Connecticut across the way. And there's a pretty nice beach over that way. And Billy Joel cut his teeth right around there. I think one of the lyrics of one of his songs mentions that. So yeah, I'd say probably 20-minute drive. Not far at all. Yeah.
So the other thing you mentioned is that when you were a high school student, your director, and I'm sorry I forgot his name, you mentioned again, but he gave you a lot of opportunities to conduct and to sort of do leadership things. Were you the drum major?
We didn't have a marching band, which is very interesting. So I went to a Catholic high school, Holy Family High School, Huntington, Long Island. And we didn't have enough kids in the band program to really have a marching band. We had a pep band that would play occasionally at a football game, but it was really more about the concert band and the jazz band. And that was really the focus. I don't think I ever heard, this is going to sound weird, I don't think I ever heard a marching band play until I got to Michigan. And, that was a pretty crazy first time to hear a marching band play, was to hear the Michigan band. So I had zero experience in marching band when I went away to college.
Wow, that's sort of a remarkable thing if you think about what you're doing now.
Yeah, I would say so.
We should probably dig into that.
Well, I think, although I got a late start, of course, the Michigan band, was a fantastic organization and very tradition. I got there only, it seems hard to believe, but I got there only about 4 years after Ravelli retired. Some crazy number like that. Like, it wasn't that long before I got there. And of course, he cast a huge shadow over that, especially the marching band, and the structure, the discipline, the musicality of the whole thing. Just really, I caught the bug big time. I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I loved my time in the marching band.
All right, so Mark, in high school, I kind of go back to this. You said you had those opportunities. When did you know? You said that you were thinking about academics, and you had a good SAT score. You were thinking Ivy League, and you mentioned that when you went to Michigan, that you got that letter. Was that the moment you knew that you were going to be a musician, or was it before that?
Well, it was really before that, and it was really my high school band director that not only was he giving me opportunities in school, but he also was hiring me to play jazz gigs with his own band. So I think must have been late in my junior year. I became the drummer in his band, and we were playing, at clubs and coffee houses and such, and jazz standards, that kind of thing. Weddings, we were doing weddings too. So I was starting to make, back then, this was the late 70s, $50 a gig. It was like a lot of money. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And the fact that he trusted me enough to do that, and I really cut my teeth, learning all the standards with him and learning how to do weddings and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, he just and he recognized my talent and really tried to give it a place to grow. And so I would say by mid junior year, I was pretty set on going into music, whatever that meant. For me, that meant something way different than it does now. But at the time, I was, going to be the next Buddy Rich. I was going to have my own band and go on the road and, make a lot of money and be in movies. Who knew? I mean, what does a 17-year-old kid know about that stuff? But so that's when I sort of knew. Like I looked at other careers, engineering. I was a little too squeamish to be a doctor. Being a lawyer didn't really have much appeal. And the more my high school time went on, the more I just thought, this is it. I've got the music bug. This is really what I want to do. And that's where I was spending all my time. Like when I got home from school, I went straight down to the basement and I played my drums until my dad got home from work, because it was pretty loud. I'm sure the neighbors didn't like it too much, but once he got home from work, it was kind of, he needed a little quiet time there. So, I got it, 2-3 hours on my practice before he got home. And then after dinner, I would just go back down and play on the practice pad that wasn't too loud, until it was time for bed pretty much. I mean, I was just, I had the bug,
All right. So one of the things you also mentioned is that after your time at Florida, you went and got your doctorate in Texas, and then you moved to New York City. How were you filling the time? How were you staying engaged in music during that period?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was fortunate enough, obviously, to be at Texas, but not only to be there, but I was there at a really interesting time when Jerry was the host for the National CBDNA conference. Mike Haithcock was the president at the time. And Mike's big project during his presidency was to commission an opera that had the pit as a wind band. That opera was named Bandana. Daron Hagen was composed it for the premiere there. And so the UT School of Music really went hook, line, and sinker into this project. So the opera program, the wind ensemble, everything. So I was rehearsing the wind ensemble. I was rehearsing the chorus. And then Mike Haithcock at the time was at Baylor. So he would come in once in a while and rehearse. And then I would do the sort of day-to-day stuff until a couple weeks before the premiere. But anyway, Daron was from New York City, and a good friend of his was David Del Tredici. So I was assigned to pick David Del Tredici up from the airport and take him to his hotel and all that stuff. And I sat next to him at the premiere of the opera. And who knew this was going to happen? But when I moved to New York, I told Daron and David that I was in New York now on the Upper West Side, which is very close to where they all lived. And they started inviting me to their parties and their concerts. And so I was still steeped in the world. I mean, Pulitzer Prize winning composers everywhere. John Corigliano was at a lot of these parties. So, it was just a fantastic time. The other cool thing was I lived close enough to Lincoln Center. I would walk down every Thursday morning and do the I think it was a $5 ticket to watch the dress rehearsal. They allowed the public to go in, and Kurt Mazur was the music director, but they were searching for a new music director. He had announced his retirement. And so I got to see a whole bunch of up and coming conductors. And, the one conductor that really made a huge impression, not only on me, but really on the orchestra, was Riccardo Muti. And I think the orchestra wanted him badly. To see the New York Phil on the edge of their seat when he was speaking to them, they were listening to his stories and hanging on every word. And this was, the New York Phil is kind of known as, at least back then, it was, let's say a little jaded. They were the pros, and they didn't like the conductors interrupting their their workday or whatever. But Riccardo was just unbelievable, and they couldn't come to an agreement. I think he wanted to give them 12 weeks a year, and they wouldn't accept less than 16. And unfortunately, they let him get away, and he eventually took the Chicago opening. But that was a really fascinating time to be watching the New York Phil. And of course, Phil Smith was playing first trumpet, and just an incredible orchestra. So I got to hear them play every week. And, and the other thing was I was doing a lot of arranging for wind ensemble, no, marching band too, but wind ensemble. That's when I wrote Millennium Canons while I was in New York. And I did the David Del Tredici's Acrostic Song. I arranged that for like a grade 4 band, but also did a wind ensemble transcription for soprano and wind ensemble, and worked with him on that. And he got the commission to do his first wind ensemble piece while I was living there in New York. And so, I was talking to him a little bit about scoring for band. He was like many orchestral composers. They look at the band score and they go, "Oh my God, no strings. What do I do?" So I was helping him a little bit with that aspect of it. And so just, I definitely filled the time, and, was still very much involved in the music world, but, didn't have a full-time gig and didn't need one. My wife was, senior vice president of sales and marketing for this company that went public. So, it was a great time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so then you go to Clemson, and you are now the president of CBDNA. How did that come about? How did you sort of get involved in the leadership? And if you can talk about that, maybe.
Sure. Even though I've been president for almost 2 years now, it really seems very surreal that I'm in this position, and I'm very humbled by it, and I'm humbled that my colleagues had the faith and trust in me to elect me to this position. But the way it started was, of course, Jerry Junkin was very involved in CBDNA. He became president shortly after I was in Austin, and we went to all the national conferences and the division conferences when I was in grad school. But when I got to South Carolina, as soon as my feet hit the ground, I think it was Les Hicken. He was at Furman University. He called me up and he said, "Mark, we need somebody to be the state chair for CBDNA for South Carolina. Do you want to do it?" And I think it was something that they just wanted the new guy to do, So I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll do that." And then a couple of years later, when Jerry was president, he became president, I think in 2004 or so. So this was a couple of years after I got to Clemson. He called me up and said, "Mark, I want you to be the chair of the athletic band committee. I hear there's talk of the marching band people splitting off from CBDNA, and I want you to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'll support you in whatever you need, but I need you to fix this." So the marching band symposium, the athletic band symposium, was in its infancy. I attended my first one in 2006. I think that was the third or fourth one, maybe the third one. John Woods at Ohio State had started that. And, I went there as this sort of an outsider. It was a small group of folks. And I went in and tried to mend the fence, as it were. The athletic band folks were pretty fed up with CBDNA because they really weren't getting anything out of CBDNA. There was really nothing happening at all in terms of marching band or athletic band. So I put together a committee of people that I met at that symposium. John Madden at Michigan State, Jeff Fuchs at North Carolina, Stephen Moore, who was at Colorado State at the time, Jay Reese, who's now at Miami. He was at Arizona at the time. Just some really forward-thinking people that impressed me at the symposium. And we met in Indianapolis at the offices of BOA. They were nice enough to give us their big boardroom there, and we just locked ourselves in a room for like 2 days and brainstormed, and basically came out of there with a new invigorated marching band and athletic band presence within CBDNA. So I think a lot of the marching band people noticed what I had done there. And then a couple of years after that, I was asked if I would be willing to run for the Southern Division presidency. So there's 6 divisions within CBDNA. They're divided up by region. The Southern Division encompasses 11 states. And so I said, sure. And lo and behold, I was elected to that position and served as vice president, then president-elect, and then president of the Southern Division. And then as my time wound down as Southern Division president, in order to run for the national office, you have to be a division president first. I was asked by somebody who will remain nameless at the end of my time as division president if I would be willing and interested in running for the national office. So I had literally never thought that my career in CBDNA would go that far, but this person was very insistent that they thought I would make a great president, and I listened to that person and eventually decided to go ahead and run. And I ran for the position and won the election. And it's interesting. CBDNA is a very sort of it's a long process. If you're going to be the national president, it's 17 years of a commitment from the time you're elected to the division presidential line to the time you're elected to the national office until you rotate off the board. It's 17 years. So, you could have a child and send them off to college almost, during the time that you're on the CBDNA board. So, it's kind of crazy. But aside from my own program here at Clemson, CBDNA is a huge passion of mine, and I'm very indebted to the organization for what it has given to me as a musician and a young, grad student, up and coming conductor. I learned so much from CBDNA and followed all these great people who came before me. And I'm very humbled to look back on the past presidents and, realize that I'm in the same line as all these people, Hunsberger and Ravelli and Reynolds and Junkin and Kirchhoff and, just the who's who of the band world. So, it's been great.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, Mark, you we'll touch on this a little bit because we have to, but I had Robert Ambrose on the show, and we talked about the CBDNA Response Committee report. And I have to say that, as a band director, as someone who's, in the field, that you were one of the organizations that sort of led the way in the spring when we were all sort of flailing about looking for ideas. Can you talk a little bit about CBDNA and back in March and April when things seemed going off the rails?
Sure. In a way, there were some things that came together that were oddly fortuitous. So I had originally planned on taking a sabbatical during my presidency so I could devote some time to my main passion and my main platform when I ran for the presidency, which was to increase the diversity of our organization. both people of color and gender. So I was really sort of focused on those things during the sabbatical. The sabbatical was last spring. And so right in the middle of my sabbatical, this pandemic hit, and I literally dropped everything that I was doing and just completely focused on what could CBDNA do to help the situation. And because A, I wasn't teaching at the time, and B, I didn't, my university allows for a service sabbatical, and I'm very grateful to Clemson that they have that program. So I was not expected to produce anything other than service. So, I rolled up my sleeves and talked to some people within the organization and formed this committee, a COVID response committee. And really I asked Robert to chair that. And that was really focused on what are we going to do in the fall if the pandemic is still on and we can't meet in person, or, what is this going to look like, and how are we going to keep band alive in the fall? And can we provide resources for band directors at all levels to be able to do their jobs and not lose, a generation of students to this pandemic? So once that committee got going, Mallory Thompson was on that committee as well. And she pinged me very early on and said, we don't know much about the science of this virus and how it might affect bands. We should really look into this. And it really sparked that idea. So on April 25th, I sent an email out, I think, to 16 other music organizations, all the biggies, NAFME and the choral organizations, the orchestral organizations, mainly college, but, music ed, all those types of organizations. Some of which I was a member of. And I realized we were all working the pandemic problem separately. And I thought, well, let's see if we join forces, maybe we can approach this from a different angle. So that was April 25th. By April 27th, I had my first meeting with James Weaver. He was with the NFHS, the National Federation of High School State Associations. And they're a great organization. They have a lot of infrastructure. Whereas, as president of CBDNA, it's a pretty lonely position. I have a lot of autonomy, but really no personnel that I can really just call up and say, hey, could you do this for me? So James and I had a meeting that Monday morning. I sent the email on Saturday to these organizations, and it quickly became apparent that we needed to fund a scientific study on how aerosols affect not only wind instruments, but choirs and theater, and even athletes. So it was pretty apparent to me in late March when news broke about the Skagit County Choir in Washington State, that like 80% of the choir members were infected at one rehearsal, that this virus was being transmitted via aerosol. And I started looking through some science studies, and there really wasn't much. There was one from the late 1940s about band and tuberculosis spread. And what I saw alarmed me a little bit, because tuberculosis is spread the same way as COVID-19. And, but the study was over 50 years old, and that was pretty much it. There was a study on I'm going to say it wrong, vuvuela. This is the plastic horn that people blow at soccer games, and the aerosol production on that looked pretty scary. Not really the same as a regular wind instrument as we think of it. But anyway, by the end of that week, James and I met on Monday. I think we had Shelley Miller's name by the end of the week. Alan McMurray, who was at Colorado, put us in touch with her. She's a scientist in the aerosol and indoor pollution remediation field. And we asked her if we commissioned a study, could you do that at Colorado? And she said yes. And then we asked her to put together, how much would this cost? And And I went, woman went, okay, let's see if we can raise $37,000. And then she came back and said, well, we're going to need to do this. And the price went up and it kept going up until it was like $125,000. And then she said, well, in order for this study to have validity, it's going to have to be duplicated at another institution. So we're going to have to double the budget. So now we were at $250,000. And, James and I just went to work and, we basically sold it to everyone we could get on a Zoom call with. I think there was a 3-week span where we were doing like 4 to 6 Zoom calls a day, just asking people for money. And, everybody stepped up. We raised that $250,000 in 3 weeks, which, trying to get money out of music organizations in April or May of 2020 was just crazy. But the pitch was, look, we need to figure out what's going on, because if we don't, this could be the end of music education and instrumental music choirs. Who knows when we'll be able to do this again unless we find out what's going on. So it went pretty quickly, and we really had to move the science team along. They were not used to working this quickly, but we wanted to get some information out before the school year started. And James and I decided early on, look, if it's not safe, we're going to have to tell people that no music this year. And our first meeting after they went into the lab was very depressing. It was kind of cool from a scientific standpoint. They showed us what was going on. And sure enough, there were lots of aerosols coming out of the instruments. My heart sank. But then right away they said, however, we went out to Target and bought some pantyhose. And look what happens when you put 2 layers of pantyhose over the end of the instrument. And the aerosol was cut down by like 80%, 90%. So right away, we knew that even though the news was bad, that there was going to be a way to control the aerosol. So that was our first meeting. I think we gave on July 13th. We presented all that information to the coalition and put it out on the web and YouTube and all that, and tried to get the word out. And it did. It got out pretty quickly. So that's why you see everybody with bell covers and wearing masks while playing. We're talking about ventilation of indoor spaces, outdoors when possible. All of this came from this study. And it was, looking back on it now, I mean, we're still in the middle of it. We had a meeting today, actually. The study is ongoing. But to look back on it now and think, if we hadn't started this study when we did and didn't get the first wave of information and data out to the profession, I don't know where we'd be right now. I know even in California, they still are not allowing in-person music. And we're trying to convince them right now that it can be done safely. The good news is, knock on wood, here we are in November, and of all the bands that have started up this year, there have been 0 documented cases of one student giving the coronavirus to another. And there have been numerous cases where students are in the rehearsal with COVID. They just didn't know it yet. And because of all these mitigations, there hasn't been one case of transmission during music rehearsal. So, the good news is we can continue to play, although it's, it is cumbersome, obviously, to have reduced instrumentation and to have to wear masks and have to use bell covers. But the alternative is nothing. So, I feel fortunate that we're at least in a place where some of us are getting to do our thing.
It's, one thing I'll ask from my perspective as someone who's actually teaching kids, how are you dealing with masks and particularly for the flutes? And, I have all kinds of problems because I have like 5th and 6th and 7th grade kids. And so we have masks flopping everywhere. It's a hot mess most days.
Yeah. So, in my the outdoor rehearsal, they pull their masks down to play. That's with the marching band. I'm not requiring them to wear a slitted mask during marching band rehearsal. Outdoors, the data shows that it's almost 20 times less likely to transmit the virus outdoors. Indoors, I'm taking many, many more precautions. So they have to wear a slitted mask and they have to have their regular mask, both. So there's no talking without their regular mask on. They're not allowed to talk with their slitted mask. And then flutes, oddly enough, going into the study, I thought they would be the worst aerosol producers. It turns out they produce the least amount of aerosol. The hypothesis we finally came to was that you need a wet vibrating surface in order to produce aerosol. So if you think about a singer, the vocal cords become the aerosol producer. You think about a brass, your wet lips behind the mouthpiece are vibrating at a pretty high rate of speed with, a fair amount of moisture behind there. And then, the reed instruments, the reed has to be wet. And then especially the double reeds, you've got two wet reeds vibrating at a high rate of speed with a very fast airstream going through. So in many ways, they're like the worst. The oboe is one of the worst, but the flute is pretty minimal. But just to be sure, we have the flute players wear a surgical mask, and then they just put the head joint behind the surgical mask, and that's going to stop 90% of anything that's might be coming out, which isn't much anyway.
Yeah. No, it's a challenge for sure. Kids aren't always so good. We have the no talking rule for sure. Mm-hmm. It's like you may not talk, which is fine, right?
Yeah. It's a good excuse to keep them quiet, right?
Right. All right. So, it's been remarkable, and I want to thank you from the community for what you've done and managing to find the money for those studies. That's a remarkable story. I didn't know the figure was quite that high. I knew it was going to be expensive, but $250,000 is a very large sum.
Yeah, and I should give a shout out to NAM, the National Association for Music Merchants. They literally provided half the funding for that. They gave us matching funds. Yeah, so they really stepped up. They have a research endowment, and they traditionally fund music education type studies, and because they saw that this was potentially going to be a disaster, they stepped up in a big way. And at first, they gave us $40,000. Then in the next meeting, the price had gone up, and Mary told us, how much do you need? And she just kept upping the number until we had half the money just from NAM. So we made it a matching grant. So when James and I were selling it to other people, we said, if you contribute $1,000, it'll be turned into $2,000, or if you give $5,000, it'll be doubled. So that was a good way. That's always a good way in sales anyway, or fundraising. But NAM stepped up. So a lot of people stepped up. My own organization, CBDNA, stepped up in a big way. The NFHS did as well. Everybody stepped up. Everybody that could found the pennies in their couch and just helped out in any way they could. So, it was a big group effort.
All right. So, I always want to try to give you a chance to talk about what you're doing now. And you've talked a lot about your position at Clemson, but I want to know a little bit more about the bands there, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let me make up a fantasy here. So let's say that I'm Mark and I am a freshman. What's my major going to be? History major at Clemson. Yeah. And I want to join the marching band. What's the Marching Tigers? What are you?
We call it the Tiger Band.
The Tiger Band. All right. I want to join the Clemson band. What's my time at Clemson going to look like? And how does it start? How does it end, kind of thing?
Well, first of all, we want to tell the high school student that's looking at us that we're not going to take an inordinate amount of their time. We understand that they're majoring in history, that we're going to get a lot done in the little time that we have together. We're going to set the bar high. We're not going to settle for anything less than their best, but We're also never going to schedule extra rehearsals or go overtime. Our rehearsals are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 to 6. And when 6 o'clock hits, rehearsal's over. And if I happen to miss by a minute, I usually give the band double that. The next rehearsal will end 2 minutes early if I go a minute over. So I always give them the time back doubled. If we do happen to go over, which we don't very often. So, we're very cognizant of their time. We also do a lot of traveling. So if they enjoy traveling, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to do that. We also have a great culture in our band. We work really hard, but we have a good time while we're doing it. And it's a very socially oriented band, not in a bad way, but just, their friends, their best friends are all in band. I always tell everyone on the first meeting of the year, look around the room because chances are you're going to see your future spouse sitting somewhere in this room.
Oh my.
And, yeah. I mean, every year we have, at least 5 weddings of 2 people who met in Tiger Band.
Oh, wow.
So travel is a big part of our pitch. And, of course, the football team doesn't hurt our recruiting effort. But I always have to tell people, it wasn't like this 6 years ago. And the band, the first time we went to the college football playoff at the end of the 2015 season, nobody knew that was coming, including our coach, Jabo Sweeney. I'm sure, in his most private moment, he wouldn't have dreamed that was going to happen that year, but it did. And, I'm very proud of that band because, from the outside, people would think, and probably rightly so, oh, yeah, it must be really easy to recruit for that band. Well, in 2015, that band that took the field against Alabama at halftime, I am so proud to look back at that performance. You can look it up on YouTube. I always tell people, we didn't get good because the big time hit us. We were ready for the big time when it came to us. And so that band in 2015 was every bit as good as the one we have this year. And we have a great band this year. It's such a joy to go to every rehearsal with them. It's the best 2 hours of my day. And, even in this weird time, we're getting to do great things. And, I certainly hope the freshmen, are hanging with it. Cause, once this is all over, hopefully we can go back to a normal sort of experience. And, we're very cognizant that they're not here to major in marching band. But I know that they want to be the best they can. And they want to feel like they're part of an organization that's bigger than themselves. We all want that feeling. And so that's sort of, what we try and give them. So, I think, we have a very high retention rate amongst the students. And we're capped now. That's one difference from 2015 is, we had to eventually cap the band because if we kept taking everybody that wanted to be in the band, which we did, we'd have, 600 people in the band, which is just too unwieldy. And I don't have a staff big enough to deal with all that. So it's been very successful. And I think, it's a pretty easy sell, for a high school student. And the other great thing is, as the years have gone by and the band has gotten better and better, I'm getting more and more students from the top programs in South Carolina and beyond South Carolina. Whereas when I first started here, I didn't have any of those kids coming out of high school. So it really, it took a lot of work to turn the thing around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's some pretty good bands in the ACC.
Yeah. And really, as the years have gone on, all the bands in the ACC have gotten better. And I think it's true in around the whole college landscape. I think the college bands now are probably as good as they've ever been, just as a whole, taken all as a conglomerate. There's some really great things going on. Very proud of our profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a master's student in Boulder in the early 90s, back when CU was having its success. And I remember the Colorado marching band from those days as a just as a student in the stands. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, they were good, but I do think in general all the bands are better than that era in the 90s.
Yeah. And I think it's also a tribute to what's happening in the high schools too. The students that are coming into Clemson can really play very well, and I tip my hat to all the music educators out there working in the high schools to make these students sound great. It's really, our band is just a mirror of what's happening at the high school level.
All right, Mark. So, one of the questions I like to ask guests is, you've had a storied career. You're the president of CBDNA. You're the director at a major college's marching band. What kind of lessons have you learned over the years? If, let's say we were going to talk to someone who was starting out, would you want to share with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people ask me that question, actually. And I give this answer, and it really, looking back at my own career, I think it's what happened to me. And I can connect the dots all throughout my career, that every next step that I took really happened because of this one thing. And this is the advice that I give to younger people, my students here at Clemson, even when they ask me, what's your advice? It's to do the best that you possibly can at everything you're doing, whether it's your schoolwork, whether it's band rehearsal, practicing your part. If you're asked to do something above and beyond, and it's something you don't really necessarily want to do it anyway, and do it with a good attitude and a smile on your face, because somebody is going to be watching you, and you never know when that person will have an opportunity for you and think of you because of the way you did that menial task, whatever it might have been, and give you an opportunity. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I mentioned the one about Joe Scagnoli at Ball State and Disney. So in the summer after my junior year of college, I auditioned for and made the Disney All-American College Marching Band, and a very select group. I think 1,000 people auditioned, and just a 20-piece group. They had a couple of 20-piece groups. So very, very hard to get into. Very professional environment, and I basically learned how to be a professional musician at Disney. They taught us how to do that. And I really took it to heart, and I really just gave it I gave every day 100%. Well, Joe Scagnoli was the director of the Epcot band. I was at the Magic Kingdom, but the two bands would get together once in a while and have some, joint performance or whatever it might be. And Joe Scagnoli remembered me. So when I was on the road and I stopped in at Ball State, and he was now the director of bands there, that's how he right away, he said, you should come here and do a master's in conducting and help me out with the band program. I mean, that was in a 5-minute conversation with him all those years later. And I'll give you another example, and this is the Jerry Junkin connection. So not only did I play in his ensemble while he was a doctoral student at Michigan, but I was in Gainesville when he got the Texas job, and he came back to do the Florida All-State Band. Well, I went down to Tampa and watched his rehearsal for a while, and he saw me in the back of the room. I hadn't seen him in probably 5 years. I was standing in the back of the room. I can't tell you what piece they were rehearsing, but it was something that involved a lot of percussion. And he stopped the rehearsal and he looked at me, and he remembered my name. Of course, he remembers everybody, but he said, "Mark Spede, could you take the percussion section somewhere? They're having a lot of trouble with this piece, and I don't want to spend a lot of time in the rehearsal with the wind players here. Could you take them somewhere and fix them?" And so I took the All-State percussion section out into a different room. We moved all the equipment out, and I spent about an hour with them. And, I made sure that when they went back into that rehearsal, that they had their stuff together. And sure enough, they went back in, and Jerry did the piece, and he looked back at me and he smiled, and nodded his head, because everything that he wanted done was done. Well, years later, again, I go out to Austin to interview and audition for the conducting studio there. And, it was those personal connections. We always talk about networking, but it's beyond networking. It's like making an impression on somebody. And the way to make an impression is to do an outstanding job with a great attitude and a smile on your face. And that's my best advice. And that has helped me more than anything else. Just people remembered me. They remembered not only my talent, but hopefully my work ethic. And they knew that if they asked me to do something, that I would do it and I wouldn't complain about it.
Remember your first term of teaching? Learning all the skills that you don't get taught in music school, managing a transitioning culture in your classroom, finding out that you have to teach guitar this term? During those early years, we found out that leaning on a community of music educators was important, not only for building that knowledge in ourselves, but also maintaining enough sanity to serve the students right in front of us. Amused is a podcast centered around a community of music teachers. Between the four of us, we teach choir, band, orchestra, general, jazz, and marching band at the elementary through collegiate levels. We certainly don't have all the answers, but you're welcome to listen in while we try to find them. Join us while we work through the challenges of music teaching and celebrate the joy of bringing music making into the lives of young people. In each episode, you'll hear stories, both good and bad, about that week of teaching, and we'll try and tackle an issue that one of us is struggling with. Something we're all taught is that music brings people together, but being the only teacher in your subject at a site can be really isolating. We think everyone ought to be a part of a community, and you're welcome to come join ours. Episodes come out on Wednesdays during the school year, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and at amusedcast.org.
All right, so the first of the final questions is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this subject. I used to do a lot of adjudicating in the first part of my career. And to be honest, it was mostly because I needed the money. I never felt really good about it. I never enjoyed putting numbers on a paper and declaring winners and losers, because let's face it, if there's a band that wins a competition, that means everyone else loses. And it always sort of bothered me. And so I'll fast forward to when my own children picked up music in the sixth grade, and they did sixth grade band, which was not the path I took. I went to private school, and we didn't have a band when I was that age. I didn't have a band until I went to high school in ninth grade. So, as I watched my own children go through the band program here in Clemson, they have a fantastic middle school director. His name is Daniel Marsh. He's just so wonderful. And in fact, his son is first chair in both the marching band and the symphonic band. But anyway, I saw how he used competition within the middle school band and how motivating it was at that age level. When you're in sixth grade, that is a great way to motivate somebody to practice. Most kids, not all kids buy into it, but I sort of changed my tune a little bit. So I was very anti-competition. And then when I saw my own kids and how motivated they were by it, I had to rethink my process. So I've come to the point where I think, I philosophically, I don't enjoy the idea of competition in music, but let's face it, in order to win a job at Clemson University, I had to compete against other people, both on the resume and in person, the final people who interviewed. And we have to do that. When I auditioned for, the Disney band, there were 900 and something people who didn't get in. So I beat somebody out. So we do have to compete, and we do live in a competitive world. To get ahead, you have to compete against other people. But I think, the people who do it, the directors who do it successfully, put that competition in a good, they find a way to do it that it's not destructive. And I think that's so important, is to use the competition as a motivator and not as an end goal. The goal is not to win a trophy. The goal is to give your best performance. And I think the ones who can do that the best are really going to have the most success, because let's face it, if a kid is in a high school band that's not going to win anything, what is their motivation to stick around? You know, if they're going to go to these competitions and get quote unquote beat every week, what is their motivation to stay? And so the people who find a way to motivate those students are the ones that really, I think have got it all figured out. And let's face it, we all stuck with music because we realized at some point that music made us feel good. We had a feeling when we were playing or performing, or maybe even just listening to music, that we didn't get anywhere else. And that's what motivated me to practice. I just loved the way it made me feel. And the better I got, the more I craved it. And the better I got, the better I wanted to be. And so, and I talk about competition with my incoming students in the band program here at Clemson. I talk to them about, you've had a lot of extrinsic motivation in your life so far. You've gone to competitions in BOA and done all those things. And some of you have won the state trophy, in class 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever. And that's great. But now, what can you do to motivate yourself to just want to be the best you can just because it's the right thing to do? Not because anyone's going to hand you a trophy or you're going to get a medal at the end of the day, just because it's the right thing to do. That's really the lesson I'm trying to teach them at the college level, because that ability will carry with them no matter what field they go into. If they're just competing with themselves to be the best they can be, whatever career they follow, that's going to help them.
All right, Mark, the next question is one that's hard for band directors. And, we've made a joke out of being the first car in, the last car out. But it's, how do you find a work-life balance in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the one thing, once I got the program here at Clemson up and running, and I have to say, in the early days, if you do inherit a program that needs a lot of love and attention, it needs building up. I'll just tell you, my first year at Clemson, the marching band was 160. Now we're capped at 356. You're going to have to spend a lot of time, and your whatever family unit you have is going to have to sort of accept a little sacrifice there. But I will say this: once it got going, I made a rule that when I came home from work, my rehearsals here are 4 to 6, whether it's marching band or symphonic band, 4 to 6. I'm home at 6:30, by 6:30. And, unless I have something absolutely desperate to do, I try not to work, when I'm at home. Unless everybody else, like my children are a little more grown right now, so they have their own things going on. And, if my wife has to work, then I'll work also. But if she doesn't have to work, I won't work. And, we try and have family time every evening. And then the other part of it is, like today, Thursday is a light day for me. I had a bunch of meetings earlier today, and I have another project, a huge project that I'm juggling right now, which we haven't talked about. I'll tell you about that in a second. But, my wife was out at the farm with the horse, and she also does horse therapy with children who have issues. They work with horses and learn how to be present with the horse. Horses, it's a fascinating subject, but if you're scatterbrained, the horse is going to be scatterbrained. And if you're focused, the horse will be focused. So it's really a great tool to teach people who are having problems, how to relax and how to focus. So she had a session at 2:00 today, and the weather was so beautiful here in South Carolina today. It was like a perfect day. She said, I'm going to stay at the farm and work. It's so nice here. I'm just going to open my laptop here and just sit out. And I said, as soon as I get out of my meeting, if you want to ride, she doesn't like to ride alone in case something happens, and nobody's there. If she happened to fall off or something, and there was nobody to find her on the ground, it's dangerous to ride alone. So I said, if you want me to, I'll come out. So after my meetings, I drove out to the farm, And she was working with her own personal horse, who's just learning how to become a horse that has a rider. And, we were just out at the farm together for an hour and a half or so. And then we came home and made dinner together for the family. And then we were watching the news, and then we had the podcast. So, I spent some good family time, and but you have to work at it. You can't just let it happen. You have to make it happen. And I think if you can, try and have a few hours in the evening where you're not thinking about work. And for me, that's 6:30 to whatever until I go to bed. Whether you're binging on a Netflix show, or you're just sitting around the table, or you're watching the news, discussing politics, whatever it might be, just have that time away.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mark, this is a big question, and so we'll put the coronavirus aside since we've already talked about that. But beyond that, in the future, what are the big challenges facing music education, and how do we best meet them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the obvious answer is, how do we keep students' attention? We are inundated with the instant gratification, the 24/7 news cycle, the video games, the immersive worlds that are available to all of us right now that were unimaginable a generation ago. How do we keep our students interested in an activity that does not provide instant gratification? We're the opposite of that. It takes a long time to get good on your instrument. And so we have to find ways to provide our students with an alternative to instant gratification. And I think that's the payoff that a lot of hard work can give you. If it comes easy, it's not that gratifying, right? If you have to work for something and you have to work really hard and then you achieve that goal, that means so much more than picking up, let's say a video game the first time you pick it up and you beat the video game. That's not that interesting, something that you have to work at. So I think music can be that thing that's sort of the anti-instant gratification. And I think we have to teach our students that the payoff is much better. Giving a great performance or having a great moment in rehearsal where everything comes together and everybody, the hair on the back of everyone's neck stands up. Those are the moments that got me hooked on music. And those are the moments that I think, I try and provide for my students, and also, we'll keep them interested and involved in working towards a long-term goal. And that, that's the other thing, is teaching students that to look a ways into the future. When I was a young kid, the weekend was the future. What am I doing on Saturday? That was the future. You get older and you realize, I have to plan a little bit farther than this coming weekend, And so to teach students that, we're going to give a concert in 2 months. Well, that's so far away. How do we teach them to enjoy the process and enjoy the journey of getting better and better each day in rehearsal? And I think that's what we can provide for them that they won't get anywhere else in their life.
All right, Mark. So I've just invented a time machine, and I take you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you going to tell yourself?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. So what do I tell myself? I tell myself that stick with it. You're going to want to give up. There are going to be some obstacles in your path. There's going to be some heartbreak ahead. The goal that you have in your mind right now is a worthy goal, and I want you to keep that goal, but be ready to pivot because other opportunities will open up for you. And in the end, you're going to be very, very happy that you stayed in music. You're going to be successful. You're not going to be rich. You're not going to be fabulously wealthy, but you're going to make a very good living. and be able to go to work every day and make music. And so stick with it. It's going to be tough at times. There's going to be some down moments, but just keep your head up, keep working really hard. And I have faith in you.
If you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you'd want to conduct, and why?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm assuming you mean something from the band repertoire.
I've had answers from others. I mean, people have given me answers from outside of the band repertoire, but generally that's my audience. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll stick with band repertoire, but the older I get, the more affinity I have with Mahler and what he struggled with in his symphonies. And so, I might go to one of his symphonies, but I'll stick with the band world, because there's been some great music written for band in the last 20 years or so. And there's ample repertoire to pick from. I think my go-to answer has to be Maslanka's Fourth Symphony. It's just such a meaningful work for me. And I got to conduct it one time. I got to perform on it one time under Jerry's baton. I got to hear the Dallas Wind Symphony play it the very first time I heard it. And it just is such a moving and powerful piece, and emotional in ways that are sort of unexplainable. But if it wasn't Maslanka's Fourth Symphony, it would be John Mackey's Wine Dark Sea. I think the middle movement of that is some of the most beautiful and gut-wrenching music that I've ever heard or conducted. And I just think it's just such a masterpiece for John. He's such a treasure for our profession, as David Maslanka was, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore. But John is really coming. He's come into his own. He's just writing the best music of his life right now, and particularly that piece struck a chord with me. But all the stuff he's writing right now is great. So if it wasn't Maslanka's Fourth, it would be John Mackey's Wine Dark Sea.
All right, Mark, we're coming up to the end here. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote, given the fact that we're under a global pandemic?
Yeah, well, I do. I'm in the middle of a huge project, as if a science project that costs $250,000 and is trying to save music wasn't enough. We were looking around the landscape of college marching bands, and so many bands are not able to do what they should be doing. All the Big Ten bands, the Pac-12 bands, and all the smaller bands and the HBCUs. We decided to cook up a virtual college marching band. So the intercollegiate marching band is we have nominations in. I think we have almost 200 bands will be represented on the video. We're going to end up having about 1,600 to 1,700 performers. And this 2-minute video will be premiered at the halftime of the College Football National Championship game in Miami in the stadium.
That's awesome.
And it will also be released on social media at that same moment that it's shown in the stadium. So because bands are not able to travel right now, unfortunately, the bowl games and the college football playoff will go on without us, and it's just so heartbreaking that the band members and the pageantry is going. It's just terrible. So anyway, this virtual marching band is a way to get all college band programs that we could muster, and an opportunity for the students who don't have much to do, or even if they do. So the vision is, on the video, when it pops up, you'll be able to see, the trumpet section will have a trumpet player from Michigan standing right next to a trumpet player from Ohio State, virtually, of course. Florida State, Florida, just
no,
all
say
the
it ain't so. Say it ain't so, Mark.
Yeah, and it's sort of our coming together as a profession and as a student body of band loving people a chance to perform together, albeit virtually, and then it's going to be great. It's going to be so cool. But holy cow, it's a lot of work right now.
Yeah, I bet. Is it a click track and a tuning note, and then they just go?
Well, I actually I recorded the track with my band yesterday at our rehearsal. So they're going to play along with a recording of my, of the Clemson Tiger Band. I shouldn't say my band. It's not my band. They're going to play along with our band. And so they'll tune to us. They'll, hopefully play it the same way we're playing it. And then the drumline folks will have the opportunity to just play along with our drumline, or they can play with the full band version. So we did multiple recordings yesterday, drumline by themselves, drumline with the full band. We'll be able to have a hot mix with the drumline hotter than the wind players. We even recorded just the woodwinds playing with the drumline. And so we recorded it with click track. We had the entire drumline with headphones on, and I didn't know if this was going to work, but it worked perfectly. I don't want to reveal the chart because we haven't released it yet, but it's 120 beats per minute. So we just had a doctor beat running through everyone's headphones in the drum line, and it stayed together perfectly. It worked great. So, So we'll be, next week, the students will get all the materials they need, and then they'll have about 2 weeks to return their videos in. And then, then all the editing starts. So, that's a monumental task to try and get 1,600 individual videos, shown in a 2-minute performance. That's going to be quite the task.
All right, Mark, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, my email is mspede@clemson.edu. That's probably the easiest way. I'm also on Facebook. Really easy to find on Facebook. And I do a little bit on Twitter. My Twitter feed is mostly aerosol science and sports. My Facebook feed is mostly band director types, although there's, I have a good smattering of Clemson fans and stuff who love the band. But Facebook is sort of my professional, social media thing, and then the Twitter. But either one of those, you'll find me on there. I have an Instagram account, but I never go on Instagram. I don't know why. It just never caught on with me.
Mark, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.